Hello, this is Morel Bernard with the continuation of the story, Dracula. Yes, and it's the last episode. This is the 50th episode, the last episode of Dracula, and Halloween is around the corner. And so this might be a little bit of a longer read, but hopefully it will be an interesting read as we bring the story of Dracula to an end. Last words were, "I will strengthen me with breakfast, and then I will to my terrible work. Madame Mina still sleeps, and God be thanked, she's calm in her sleep." And by the way, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to Study Coach UK channel. Please subscribe and please share. So after Dracula, there will be another story and others. Let me continue with Dracula. Jonathan Harker's journal, 4th November, evening. The accident to the launch has been a terrible thing for us. Only for it we should have overtaken the boat long ago, and by now my dear Mina would have been free. I fear to think of her, off on the whirls near that horrid place. We have got horses, and we follow on the track. I note this whilst Goldman is getting ready. We have our arms. The Gansey must look out if they mean fight. Oh, if only Morris and Seward were with us. We must only hope. If I write no more, goodbye, Mina. God bless and keep you. Dr. Seward's diary, 5th November. With the dawn we saw the body of Gansey before us, dashing away from the river with their litre wagon. They surrounded it in a cluster and hurried along as though beset. The snow is falling lightly, and there's a strange excitement in the air. It may be our own feelings, but the depression is strange. Far off I hear the howling of wolves. The snow brings them down from the mountains, and there are dangers to all of us, and from all sides. The horses are nearly ready, and we are soon off. We ride to death of someone. God alone knows who or where or what or when or how it may be. Dr. Van Heslin's memorandum, 5th November afternoon. I am at least sane. Thank God for that mercy at all events, though the proving it has been dreadful. When I left Madame Mina sleeping within the holy circle, I took my way to the castle. The blacksmith's hammer, which I took in the carriage from Versti, was useful, though the doors were all open. I broke them off the rusty hinges, lest some ill intent or ill chance should close them, so that being entered I might not get out. Jonathan's bitter experience served me here. By memory of his diary, I found my way to the old chapel, for I knew that here my work lay. The air was oppressive. It seemed as if there was some sulphurous fume, which at times made me dizzy. Either there was a roaring in my ears, or I heard afar off the howl of wolves. Then I bethought me of my dear Madame Mina, and I was in terrible plight. The dilemma had me between his horns. Her I had not dared to take into this place, but left safe from the vampire in that holy circle, and yet even there would be the wolf. I resolved me that my work lay here, and that as to the wolves we must submit, if it were God's will. At any rate, it was only death and freedom beyond. So did I choose for her. Had it but been for myself, the choice had been easy. The maw of the wolf were better to rest in than the grave of the vampire. So I make my choice to go on with my work. I knew that there were at least 3 graves to find. Graves that are in habit, so I search and search. And I find one of them. She lay in a vampire sleep, so full of life and voluptuous beauty that I shudder as though I have come to murder. Ah, I doubt not that in old time, when such things were, many a man who set forth to do such a task as mine found at the last his heart fail him, and then his nerves. So he delay, and delay, and delay, till the mere beauty and the fascination of the wanton undead have hypnotized him, and he remain on and on, till sunset come and the vampire's sleep be over. Then the beautiful eyes of the fair woman open and look love, and the voluptuous mouth present to a kiss, and a man is weak. And there remain one more victim in the vampire fold, one more to swell the grim and grisly ranks of the undead. There is some fascination, surely, when I am moved by the mere presence of such an one, even lying as she lay in a tomb, fretted with age and heavy with the dust of centuries, though there be that horrid odour, such as the lairs of the Count have had. Yes, I was moved. I, Van Heslin, with all my purpose and with my motive for hate. I was moved to a yearning for delay which seemed to paralyze my faculties and to clog my very soul. It may have been that the need of natural sleep and the strange oppression of the air were beginning to overcome me. Certain it was that I was lapsing into sleep, the open-eyed sleep of one who yields to a sweet fascination, when they came through the snow-stilled air a long, low wail, so full of woe and pity, that it woke me like the sound of a clarion. For it was the voice of my dear Madame Mina that I heard. Then I braced myself again to my horrid task, and found my wrenching away tomb tops, one other of the sisters, the other dark one. I dared not pause to look on her as I had on her sister, lest once more I should begin to be enthralled. But I go on searching until presently I find it in a high, great tomb, as if made to one much beloved, that other fair sister which, like Jonathan, I had seen to gather herself out of the atoms of the mist. She was so fair to look on, so radiantly beautiful, so exquisitely voluptuous, that the very instinct of man in me, which calls some of my sex to love and to protect one of hers, made my head whirl with new emotion. But God be thanked, that soul wail of my dear Madame Mina had not died out of my ears, and before the spell could be wrought further upon me, I had nerved myself to my wild work. By this time I had searched all the tombs in the chapel, so far as I could tell. And as there had been only 3 of these undead phantoms around us in the night, I took it that there were no more of active undead existent. There was one great tomb, more lordly than all the rest. Huge it was, and nobly proportioned. On it was but one word: Dracula. This, then, was the undead home of the king vampire, to whom so many more were due. Its emptiness spoke eloquent to make certain what I knew. Before I began to restore these women to their dead selves through my awful work, I laid in Dracula's tomb some of the wafer, and so banished him from it, undead forever. Then began my terrible task that I dreaded it. Had it been but once, it had been easy, comparative. But 3. To begin twice more after I had been through a deed of horror, for if it was terrible with the sweet Miss Lucy, what would it not be with these strange ones who had survived through centuries and who had been strengthened by the passing of the years, who would, if they could, had fought for their foul lives. Oh, my friend John, but it was butcher work. Had I not been nerved by thoughts of other dead and of the living over whom hung such a pall of fear, I could not have gone on. I tremble, and tremble even yet, though till all was over, God be thanked, my nerve did stand. Had I not seen the repose in the first place, and the gladness that stole over it just ere the final dissolution came, as realization that the soul had been won, I could not have gone further with my butchery. I could not have endured the horrid screeching as the stake drove home, the plunging of writhing form, the lips of bloody foam. I should have fled in terror and left my work undone. But it is over. And the poor souls, I can pity them now and weep as I think of them placid, each in a full sleep of death, for a short moment fading. For friend John, hardly had my knife severed the head of each before the whole body began to melt away and crumble into its native dust, as though the death that should have come centuries agone had at last assert himself and say at once and loud, I am here. Before I left the castle, I so fixed its entrances that never more can the Count enter there undead. When I stepped into the circle where Madame Mina slept, she woke from her sleep, and seeing me, cried out in pain that I had endured too much. Come, she said, come away from this awful place. Let us go to meet my husband who is, I know, coming towards us. She was looking thin and pale and weak, but her eyes were pure and glowed with fervour. I was glad to see her paleness and her illness, for my mind was full of the fresh horror of that ruddy vampire sleep. And so with trust and hope, and yet full of fear, we go eastward to meet our friends, and him, whom Madame Mina tell me that she know are coming to meet us. Mina Harker's Journal, 6th November. It was late in the afternoon when the professor and I took our way towards the east, whence I knew Jonathan was coming. We did not go fast, though the way was steeply downhill, for we had to take heavy rugs and wraps with us. We dared not face the possibility of being left without warmth in the cold and the snow. We had to take some of our provisions too, for we were in a perfect desolation, and so far as we could see through the snowfall, there was not even a single off or the sign of habitation. When we had gone about a mile, I was tired with a heavy walk-in and sat down to rest. Then we looked back and saw where the clear line of Dracula's castle cut the sky, for we were so deep under the hill whereon it was set that the angle of perspective of the Carpathian mountains was far below it. We saw it in all its grandeur, perched 1,000 feet on the summit of a sheer precipice, and with seemingly a great gap between it and the steep of the adjacent mountain on any side. There was something wild and uncanny about the place. We could hear the distant howling of wolves. They were far off, but the sound, even though coming muffled through the deadening snowfall, was full of terror. I knew from the way Dr. Van Hessling was searching about that he was trying to seek some strategic point where we could be less exposed in case of attack. The rough roadway still let downwards. We could trace it through the drifted snow. In a little while, the professor signalled to me, so I got up and joined him. He had found a wonderful spot, a sort of natural hollow in a rock, with an entrance like a doorway between two boulders. He took me by the hand and drew me in. "See," he said, "here, you will be in shelter. And if the wolves do come, I can meet them one by one." He brought in our furs and made a snug nest for me and got out some provisions and forced them upon me. But I could not eat. To even try to do so was repulsive to me, and much as I would have liked to please him, I could not bring myself to the attempt. He looked very sad, but did not reproach me. Taking his field glasses from the case, he stood on the top of the rock and began to search the horizon. Suddenly he called out, "Look, Madame Mina, look, look." I sprang up and stood beside him on the rock. He handed me his glasses and pointed. The snow was now falling more heavily and swirled about fiercely, for a high wind was beginning to blow. However, there were times when there were pauses between the snow flurries, and I could see a long way round. From the height where we were, it was possible to see, a great distance and far off, beyond the white waste of snow, I could see the river, lying like a black ribbon in kinks and curls as it wound its way. Straight in front of us, and not far off in fact, so near that I wondered we had not noticed before, came a group of mounted men hurrying along. In the midst of them was a cart, a long litre wagon which swept from side to side like a dog's tail wagging with each stern inequality of the road. Outlined against the snow as they were, I could see from the men's clothes that they were peasants or gypsies of some kind. On the cart was a great square chest. My heart leaped as I saw it, for I felt that the end was coming. The evening was now drawing close, and well, I knew that at sunset the thing, which was till then imprisoned there, would take new form and could in any of many forms elude all pursuit. In fear I turned to the professor. To my consternation, however, he was not there. An instant later, I saw him below me. Round the rock he had drawn a circle, such as we had found shelter in last night, When he had completed it, he stood beside me again, saying, "At least you shall be safe here from him." He took the glasses from me, and at the next lull of the snow swept the whole place below us. "See," he said, "they come quickly. They are flogging the horses and galloping as hard as they can." He paused and went on in a hollow voice. "They are racing for the sunset. We may be too late. God's will be done." Down came another blinding rush of driving snow, and the whole landscape was blotted out. It soon passed, however, and once more his glasses were fixed on the plain. Then came a sudden cry, "Look, look, look! See, 2 horsemen follow fast, coming up from the south. It must be Quincy and John. Take the glass. Look before the snow blots it all out." I took it and looked. The 2 men might be Dr. Seward and Dr. Morris. I knew at all events that neither of them was Jonathan. At the same time, I knew that Jonathan was not far off. Looking around, I saw on the north side of the coming party 2 other men, riding at breakneck speed. One of them I knew was Jonathan, and the other I took, of course, to be Lord Godalming. They too were pursuing the party with the cart. When I told the professor, he shouted in glee like a schoolboy, and after looking intently till a snowfall made sight impossible, he laid his Winchester rifle ready for use against the boulder at the opening of our shelter. "They are all converging," he said. "When the time comes, we shall have gypsies on all sides." I got out my revolver ready to hand, for whilst we were speaking, the howling of wolves came louder and closer. When the snowstorm abated, a moment we looked again. It was strange to see the snow falling in such heavy flakes, close to us and beyond, the sun shining more and more brightly as it sank down towards the far mountain tops. Sweeping the glass all around us, I could see here and there dots moving singly and in 2s and 3s and larger numbers. The wolves were gathering for their prey. Every instant seemed an age whilst we waited. The wind came now in fierce bursts, and the snow was driven with fury as it swept upon us in circling eddies. At times we could not see an arm's length before us, but at others, as the hollow-sounding wind swept by us, it seemed to clear the air space around us so that we could see afar off. We had of late been so accustomed to watch for sunrise and sunset that we knew with fair accuracy when it would be, and we knew that before long the sun would set. It was hard to believe that by our watches it was less than an hour that we waited in that rocky shelter before the various bodies began to converge close upon us. The wind came now with fiercer and more bitter sweeps, and more steadily from the north. It seemingly had driven the snow clouds from us, for with only occasional bursts the snow fell. We could distinguish clearly the individuals of each party, the pursued and the pursuers. Strangely enough, those pursued did not seem to realize, or at least to care, that they were pursued. They seemed, however, to hasten with redoubled speed as the sun dropped lower and lower on the mountain tops. Closer and closer they drew. The professor and I crouched down behind our rock and held our weapons ready. I could see that he was determined that they should not pass. One and all were quite unaware of our presence. All at once, two voices shouted out to halt. One was my Jonathan's, raised in a high key of passion. The other, Mr. Morris's, strong, resolute tone of quiet command. The gypsies may not have known the language, but there was no mistake in the tone, in whatever tongue the words were spoken. Instinctively they reined in, and at the instant Lord Godalming and Jonathan dashed up at one side, and Dr. Seward and Mr. Morris on the other. The leader of the gypsies, a splendid-looking fellow, who sat his horse like a centaur, waved them back, and in a fierce voice gave to his companions some word to proceed. They lashed the horses, which sprang forward. But the four men raised their Winchester rifles, and in an unmistakable way commanded them to stop. At the same moment, Dr. Van Helsing and I rose behind the rock and pointed our weapons at them. Seeing that they were surrounded, the men tightened their reins and drew up. The leader turned to them and gave a word, at which every man of the gypsy party drew what weapon he carried, knife or pistol, and held himself in readiness to attack. Issue was joined in an instant. The leader, with a quick movement of his rein, threw his horse out in front, and pointing first to the sun, now closed down on the hilltops, and then to the castle, said something which I did not understand. For answer, all four men of our party drew themselves from their horses and dashed towards the cart. I should have felt terribly fear at seeing Jonathan in such danger, but that the ardour of battle must have been upon me as well as the rest of them. I felt no fear, but only a wild, surging desire to do something. Seeing the quick movement of our parties, the leader of the gypsies gave a command. His men instantly formed round the cart in a sort of undisciplined endeavour, each one shouldering and pushing the other in his eagerness to carry out the order. In the midst of this, I could see that Jonathan on one side of the ring of men, and Quincy on the other, were forcing a way to the cart. It was evident that they were bent on finishing their task before the sun should set. Nothing seemed to stop or even to hinder them. Neither the levelled weapons, nor the flashing knives of the gypsies in front, nor the howling of the wolves behind, appeared to even attract their attention. Jonathan's impetuosity and the manifest singleness of his purpose seemed to overawe those in front of him. Instinctively, they cowered aside and let him pass. In an instant he had jumped upon the cart, and with a strength which seemed incredible, raised the great box and flung it over the wheel to the ground. In the meantime, Mr. Morris had had to use force to pass through his side of the ring of Gansey. All the time I had been breathlessly watching Jonathan. I had, with the tail of my eye, seen him pressing desperately forward, and had seen the knives of the gypsies flash as he won a way through them, and they cut at him. He had parried with his great bow knife, and at first I thought that he too had come through in safety, but as he sprang beside Jonathan, who had by now jumped from the cart, I could see that his left hand he was clutching at his side, and that the blood was spurting through his fingers. He did not delay, notwithstanding this, for as Jonathan with desperate energy attacked one end of the chest, attempting to prise off the lid with his grey curry knife, he attacked the other frantically with his bowie. Under the efforts of both men, the lid began to yield. The nails drew with a quick screeching sound, and the top of the box was thrown back. By this time the gypsies, seeing themselves cowered by the Winchesters, and at the mercy of Lord Godalming and Dr. Seward, had given in and made no resistance. The sun was almost down on the mountain tops, and the shadows of the whole grove fell long upon the snow. I saw the Count lying within the box upon the earth, some of which the rude falling from the cart had scattered over him. He was deathly pale, just like a waxen image, and the red eyes glared with a horrible vindictive look which I knew too well. As I looked, the eyes saw the sinking sun, and the look of hate in them turned to triumph. But on the instant came the sweep and flash of Jonathan's great knife. I shrieked as I saw it shear through the throat, whilst at the same moment Mr. Morris's bowie knife plunged into the heart. It was like a miracle, but before our very eyes, and almost in the drawing of a breath, the whole body crumbled into dust and passed from our sight. I shall be glad as long as I live that even in that moment of final dissolution, there was in the face a look of peace, such as I never could have imagined might have rested there. The castle of Dracula now stood out against the red sky, and every stone of its broken battlements was articulated against the light of the setting sun. The gypsies, taking us as in some way the cause of the extraordinary disappearance of the dead man, turned without a word and rode away as if for their lives. Those who were unmounted jumped upon the litter wagon and shouted to the horsemen not to desert them. The wolves, which had withdrawn to a safe distance, followed in their wake, leaving us alone. Mr. Morris, who had sunk to the ground, leaned on his elbow, holding his hand pressed to his side. The blood still gushed through his fingers. I flew to him, for the holy circle did not now keep me back. So did the two doctors. Jonathan knelt behind him, and the wounded man laid back his head on his shoulder. With a sigh he took, with a feeble effort, my hand in that of his own, which was unstained. He must have seen the anguish of my heart in my face, for he smiled at me and said, "I'm only too happy to have been of any service, oh God," he cried suddenly, struggling up to a sitting posture, and pointed to me. "It was worth for this to die. Look, look." The sun was now right down upon the mountain top, and the red gleams fell upon my face, so that it was bathed in rosy light. With one impulse, the men sank on their knees, and a deep and earnest "Amen" broke from all their eyes, followed the pointing of his finger. The dying man spoke. "Now God be thanked that all has not been in vain. See, the snow is not more stainless than her forehead. The curse has passed away." And to our bitter grief, with a smile and in silence, he died a gallant gentleman. That is the end. That is the end of the story of Dracula. Oh, wishing you a wonderful Halloween. And so, do subscribe, by the way, do subscribe to Study Coach UK channel, please, and please share. And I will be back. My name's Morel Bernard. I will be back with new stories soon. Okay, wishing you all the best. Okay, and look out for the next video. I'll see you then. Bye.